Hi, and welcome to Bible History Man. Last time we talked about the civil war in Judea between the Hasmoneans, Aristobulus and Hyrcanus, both the second, over who was going to be in charge, and it brought in the attention of Rome. So now we need to learn about Rome. Once we start talking about Rome, we're going to start talking about things that are less intertestamental history and more New Testament history. So we're going to draw to the end of this intertestamental stuff and start talking about people that actually start showing up in the Bible. So let's dive into talking about Rome. First of all, Rome did away with kings a long time ago. And so they moved into a republic. They weren't the only republic in the region, but that was their form of government. And political power was exercised by the upper classes known as patricians. And the patricians exercised their political power oftentimes vis-a-vis the plebeians or the commoners that they had. And they had this really great system called patron-client. A patron would have a number of clients, and in most cases it would be a patrician that would have plebeians as their clients. And it was pretty brilliant. It brought a lot of stability to the land. And here's how it worked. If a client had a bad harvest, he wasn't able to make enough grain to feed his family, he could go to his patron, and his patron would make sure that he was fed and taken care of. And then the next year, he would be able to loan him an animal. He would be able to give him seed to replant. And so instead of getting dispossessed or taken out in society during bad harvests or raids, they just kept on going. Now, the patrician or the patron got a lot out of this too, because the more of these clients he had, the more magnificent he was. And that translates into political power. And when he goes in to make his arguments in the Republic, then he's going to be backed up by a crowd of his clients who are going to cheer at whatever he has to say. Now, the patricians would elect from their number a group of senators who would make all the laws. Also, for executive and judicial functions, they would have these guys called consuls. They would elect 2 of them every year, and they would only serve for 1 year, which was to limit their power. But they exercised extreme executive and judicial function. They led the armies. They could pronounce sentences of death. They had these little bundles of rods and an axe called a fasces. They were all powerful, but there was 2 of them, so they kind of limited each other's power. Militarily, the plebeians were mostly smallholding farmers, and those smallholding farmers would have their own panoplies, their own weapons and armor. And when it came time for battle, they could pick that stuff up and head out to battle if anyone threatened. And this meant there was a very large proportion of their population that was going to be outfitted for battle as compared to a lot of other societies that just had a professional army. So that's going to make them both resilient and have a very large army indeed. Now, the Romans are just one of a number of tribes of Latins that live in central Italy. They're mostly going to be influenced by the Etruscans, and then they're going to get a lot of stuff from the Greeks too, either through the Etruscans or, maybe directly from the Greeks. We don't know, but there's a lot of cultural borrowing there. And the Romans are going to do a lot of adapting and cultural borrowing as they go forward. They're going to wage wars against their neighbors, the Latins, and they're going to take out the Samnites and eventually the Etruscans, and are going to slowly take over all of Italy. Now, in the process, the plebeians are going to get some political power by holding out and not going to battle until they receive tribunes who are able to a certain extent, mediate the power of the consuls and give them some rights as well. And so everything seems like it's going pretty well. Now, the Romans are going to not stop at Italy. They are going to start expanding out, and they're going to have a number of battles against their seafaring enemies, the Phoenicians, who are settled primarily in the city of Carthage. And by all rights, considering the amount of defeats that Romans suffered and the disasters that they had at sea, you would think that the Romans would have been defeated. But Rome had a lot of resilience. They refused to take their deads. And so they just kept on going. And eventually, the Phoenicians just despaired of ever defeating them because, quite frankly, Hannibal defeated them just about as exquisitely as it was possible to do. He had one battle where he was able to envelop a larger army with a smaller one. And that's never even been considered or accomplished before. And after this, Everyone's just going to say, well, you can't beat the Romans. They never give up. And they're going to start defeating the successor states of Alexander the Great. And one at a time, they're going to come to wear the toga in the land. But they're going to suffer from their success, and they're going to move towards an empire. And it's going to happen like this. The smallholding farmers are going to be very busy fighting, and so they're not going to be at home taking care of their crops. And as a result, their land is going to get bought up. And, well, what do you do with your enemies when you defeat them? Well, you make them into slaves. So people will buy up the lands, fill them with these conquered slave plantations where they're going to be growing luxury items to make a lot of money. And Rome is going to become dependent on Egypt for their grain. And the nature of the army is going to change. Instead of being smallholding farmers, they're going to become professional armies that are, instead of being loyal to Rome and defending their civic rights, they're going to become loyal to their leader. And whether that's Caesar or Pompey or whatever, it's going to move us towards the land of men who exercise a great deal of power and are going to be able to start taking over and functioning like kings, although keep that word out of your mouth as far as the Romans are concerned. You can't be a king, but you can be a Caesar or an emperor or something. That's perfectly all right, because that's not it. Like I said, two such powerful leaders are Pompey and Caesar. And first, Pompey is going to be the one who's going to be drawn down into the region of Judea based on the fact that there's a lot of disorder going on with this little fight between Aristobulus and Hyrcanus II. Both of the sides are going to lay their case in front of Pompey. And this is already going to compromise the independence of Judea, because now the would-be rulers of Judea are asking Rome to settle the issue instead of settling it themselves. And so they're already kind of ceding the dominance in the region to Rome. Not that they get much choice. But eventually, Aristobulus is going to find himself fighting for Judean independence. And that's going to set him against Rome. And so Pompey is going to enter Jerusalem, and he's going to take it. Pompey is going to be extremely brutal. He's going to tear down the walls of Jerusalem. He's going to enslave thousands of Jews, and Rome is going to impose order the way they do, brutally and in a way that brooks no opposition. And he is going to set up Hyrcanus II as a puppet ethnarch or regional ruler. Now, his title is going to be high priest, but he's going to be the Roman guy in the region. And now Rome is going to be in charge of Judea. They're going to collect taxes throughout the land. Their soldiers are going to keep the peace. So now we have Judea, now underneath the boot of Rome, absorbed into the territories and independent in name only. But what are we supposed to think about Rome? Well, the brutality of Rome is going to be a brilliant method of keeping the peace. Also, when Jesus comes and the gospel needs to go forth, it needs really nice roads. And if you've ever been to Europe, you know that those Roman roads are still in operation today. They were incredible road builders, and they were incredibly good at keeping the peace and keeping lawlessness down. That, coupled with the fact that there is a common language because of Alexander the Great, means that Rome served the purposes of God to set up the world for a perfect environment for the spread of the gospel once the true King of Israel showed up. Well, that's another one of my episodes. Thank you so much for watching the whole way. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I love to answer questions. And if you're interested in it, I would love to talk about it. Also, if you have any other ideas about things that I could tell you about biblical history, I'm always open to suggestions, because it's what you want to hear that I would like to talk about. Now, if you like biblical history, like I like biblical history, or even a fraction as much as I like biblical history, I have a book out called A Helpful Handbook of Hebrew History. And it's available on WisePath Books or Amazon.com, and the links are in the comments below. Now, I would recommend that you would read a book instead of listening to videos all the time, because as an educator, I know it's much better for your brain, especially if you're not an adult yet. If you're still a youth, your brain is better if you read. So I would recommend that you read that book.